A top cabinet secretary in the federal government, a leader of a major agency, has shocked the Washington world, Democrats and Republicans alike. Let me tell you what she's done in a moment. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Men, Betsy Devos, who's the Secretary of Education, or otherwise known on the left as that idiot, has submitted her latest budget proposal. And in it, and I want to get these numbers right, so I'm referring to them here, Devos actually asks for a decrease of $3.6 billion, or 5%, to some specific department programs, and an overall decrease of $9 billion, or 13%, to the overall budget. This has been met by outrage on the left, but also it has been universally ignored by Republicans. In other words, the Republicans are going to help push increases in the Department of Education's budget, even though the Secretary of Education says that she doesn't want any more money. Now, before you fly off the handle and say, well, of course she doesn't want any more money because she doesn't think that kids should go to school, and except for the boys in the madrasas, chanting the Bible over and over again. But actually, what she's saying is, there are duplicative programs within the Department of Education, the programs that do the same things. And believe this, I read this and I almost fell out of my chair. There are some programs that have been proven ineffective, that they don't actually. I'm sorry, Steve, you okay?
What?
I didn't want to trigger a spit take there by Steve Green.
I should have done one, but my heart is all aflutter, Scott.
So actually, and by ineffective, what she means is, and it's kind of obscure, what she means is they have not achieved their stated goals. So
a government program?
A federal government program that has not achieved its stated goals, but has been carried on for years nevertheless. So anyway, those kind of programs. And in addition, she says that she's trying to pull the federal government back from telling states and school districts at the local level what they must do. And the way the federal government does that is not by essentially, sending the police to mandate something, but by sending money and saying, look, if you want the federal money, you've got to dance to the federal tune. So this has been met with either we're going to ignore it on the Republican side and opprobrium on the Democratic side. Bill Whittle, is this not why we go to the polls and vote for a Republican president? And yet, in recent memory, I can't think of a time when even Republican presidents have had department heads coming to them with reduced budgets, not just a decrease in the increase, but an actual decrease.
Hey, man, this is what happened when you elected Donald Trump. I mean, I'd love to say that it was a conflation of other forces, but I mean, whatever you want to say about the man, he puts in people like this and like Gorsuch and so on. He found an education secretary who decided that the education department is too big. I mean, my God, it's historic, absolutely historic. And for those of you who have problems with her saying we don't need as much money, I just remind you of something here. You can take a look at American students' test scores and graph it against the spending on the Department of Education, and you'll find that the more money you spend, the worse that they do. And there's a reason for this, and the reason is that the Department of Education, I think, can best be described in this video clip that I've pulled.
Spock! Spock, are you all right?
That's what it does. Is it seeks to control education in the same way that the flying space blobs do, by getting its tendrils into your nervous system and making sure you do what it tells you to do. And the problem with the Department of Education and with Common Core is it's single source of stupid, right? It's single failure stupid. We should be experimenting with all kinds of things. I don't need to get into this whole thing. Good for Betsy DeVos. Now, if we had a NASA administrator who understood that we're spending more money now in 2018 than we did in 2006 in terms of constant dollars, And the only difference is that in 2006, NASA had a space program with 3 space shuttles flying, and now we don't. But that's no reason. Just because a space program doesn't have a space program anymore doesn't mean that the space program should get less money simply because they're not flying people into space. As a contrary, that's the reason why we should spend more money on a space program that doesn't actually fly people into space than we did on a space program that did fly people into space, because to assume that you would cut that program is racist.
Well, Stephen Green, I think you know that the Department of Education, as we know it today, for all intents and purposes, didn't really exist before about the mid-1970s.
Yeah.
And then, since then, the spending has increased at a rapid rate, as Bill Whittle has indicated.
And the results.
And Betsy Devos is just another one of these Republicans who believes that if the federal government has a reduced role, then the local school boards and the local school districts and parents, as well as some people at the state level, will have an increased role in the education of our children. But Steve, my understanding is you actually live in a local community. You know those people there can't handle that, don't you?
My local community is filled with competent people. I love living where I live, and they can handle damn near anything, as long as Washington stays out of the way. Wow, Scott, there is so much to unpack with this story. And you really have to go back, I swear, to Social Security and FDR's insistence that the Social Security tax be an individual line on your pay stub, so that everybody would feel that they paid into it, and so they would want to get their money out of it, because I'm kind of paraphrasing FDR's words here. He didn't want some damn fool Republican Congress down the line taking away his Social Security program. So you get everybody to pay, you make them see that they're paying, and they feel invested in it. And this is why Democrats were so opposed to Medicare Part D that George Bush wrangled through the Republican Congress, which, by the way, is when I left the Republican Party, when they became the Medicare Part D party. But the Democrats were all screaming at Bush, "You're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. There needs to be a specific tax that people see on their pay stub, or they won't feel invested. Stupid Republicans." Well, this is why they think Betsy Devos is an idiot, because you don't ask for less money. What the hell is wrong with her? This is Washington. You ask for more money and you get it. So, of course, they think she's an idiot. But they also think she's evil, because there is this democratic attitude. It was best expressed by Hillary Clinton in her book, It Takes a Village, based on the old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And clearly, a fully modern, industrial, information age country should be basing its policies on tribal African villages. But that aside, this attitude is your children belong to us. And homeschooling, even just the recognition of a parent's right to homeschool, whether or not you want to support it with federal dollars or anything like that, but just the recognition that parents are the custodians and the raisers of their own children is anathema to progressives. They cannot stand that idea, and that is why they hate Betsy DeVos so much.
I would pay good money to hear Betsy DeVos say, "All your child are belong to us."
Oh, wait, Scott, I need to throw in one other thing.
Yes.
PJ O'Rourke had the best summation of It Takes a Village. He said, "I'll spare you having to read it. Washington is the village and you're the child."
Yeah.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, for anybody who's attended a local school board meeting, and I actually have a little experience in this regard since I was elected as the student representative to the school board. You just knew that, didn't you? You could just look at me and go, he was the student representative to the school board.
Man, I hate that guy.
That's right. In between bouts of being beat up, he was elected. But anyway, so I've sat through literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of hours of school board meetings, not only at that school board, but then I was a reporter and I covered five different school districts for a local newspaper. The idea that they have in Washington, D.C., that somehow people in your community are incompetent to educate your own children is so offensive that everybody at every one of those school boards should rise up and give a collective single-digit salute to the federal government in Washington, D.C. The only reason why the local school board does what it does is because it's being told to do so by the state or by the federal government. And what that does is, in your local community, your elected school board and your superintendent have very little leeway as to what they can do to improve the education in your school district. This is why we're having this big discussion about guns in schools too. Why are we going to Washington, D.C. to say we need safer schools? It's because we have no power at the local level, and we have no power at the local level because we have been willing to take the money from D.C., which is how they bought our loyalty and bought our compliance with the ideas that some brainiac in Washington, D.C. think is a great idea. If you look around you right now at people in your family, at your own neighbors, at the highly educated people in your own community, and you literally think to yourself, man, I'm glad we don't have to try to educate our kids. We could never do that. Well, then maybe you need to have a Department of Education. But Betsy Devos reducing the spending by 13% is, I just think, a wonderful start. 87% to go. Thank you, Betsy. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, thank you to everybody who contributes to the membership at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.